Alrighty! G'day everybody, it's the Dogger! Time for another showcase video. This particular episode is all about one of Australia's most popular and iconic rock and roll bands of all time. First formed in Adelaide in 1973, called Chisel. And their original existence was from 1973 up until 1983. They have had numerous reunions since 1997, their latest one being in 2020, just prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, by the way. Anyway, this is a look at the Cold Chisel albums that I have. These are all original albums, so this will probably be the first of a possible 2 or 3 part series of videos, this one. Brief rundown. Cold Chisel, the lineup was of course Jimmy Barnes, or Jim Barnes as he was known at the time, on lead vocals, Ian Moss on guitar and vocals occasionally, Don Walker on piano, Phil Small on bass guitar, and Steve Presswich on drums, who tragically passed away of brain cancer in early 2011 and has since been replaced by Charlie Drayton on drums as of 2011. So anyway, this is basically the albums and a couple of compilations that were released between 1978 and 1988. Let's start with the band's self-titled debut album from 1978. The woman on the right is the wife of former Australian singer Daryl Braithwaite, I believe. Pretty bland-looking back cover. This is a gatefold. Inside here, we've got some lyrics and some pictures and stuff. Again, really need to change how I record these. I mean, again, these are just lyrics. This album's got some pretty good songs, like Juliet, which is a pretty good rocker that kicks off the album, and Kaysan, which is about life after Vietnam for a particular veteran. It's probably the biggest hit the band ever had, even though at the time it was quickly banned from radio up until probably about 1980 or so. Then you've got a few tracks like Home and Broken Hearted and One Long Day, which became regulars in the band's set lists, and a few other songs like Daskazine and Rosaline and Northbound, and just how many times. Pretty good debut album. The production wasn't exactly perfect, and they were pretty much ignored by radio. The debut album was originally released on the Atlantic Records label. All the songs were written by piano player Don Walker at the time, except for Juliet, which was a co-write between him and Jimmy Barnes. Very rare to come across this Atlantic album. I had taken quite a bit to find a copy. Anyway, the album didn't exactly set the charts on fire in 1978, so a live EP was quickly rushed out towards the end of 1978, and I bet all the social justice warriors are going to go crazy when they see this particular name. This live EP is called, well, I'm sure you can easily read it, so, I'm not even going to say it. It's very inappropriate, that title, really. Anyway, some live cuts here. Merry-Go-Round, which would end up on the band's next album, and Mona and the Preacher was pretty much a song that was in the band's setlist since probably 1975, and of course they did a cover of Wild Thing as well. The band had moved to Elektra as their record label for the release. This is the label itself. Some pretty impressive performances of these two from the first album. Although I think Home and Broken Heart was sped up just a little bit too quick. The early version of, as I said, Merry-Go-Round, which has pretty much been a staple in the band's set list since it was first written. Again, piano player Don Walker was the main songwriter for the band at the time. 1979, the band released their second album, which is titled Breakfast at Sweethearts. This is them, not at the actual cafe, but it's one of the nearby cafes. From left to right, Steve Presswich here, Phil Small here, Jimmy Barnes in the middle, and Ian Moss to the right here, and Don Walker to the far right. That's the lineup at the time. Bit of a generic looking back cover as well. Hang on, I shouldn't have put that there right away, hang on. Yeah, no gatefold this one. Insert's pretty plain looking. Just the lyrics again. You've got Conversations, there's a merry-go-round, and Dresden, which is a bit of a weird one. That one, Goodbye, Astro, Goodbye, would go on to be one of their next big songs, even though it didn't exactly set the charts on fire when it was issued as the band's second single following K-San. And Ship and Steel, I'm Gonna Roll Ya, Showtime, you know, basically a lot of this stuff was performed live during that time. Also on the Elektra label at the time. Bit of a unique label, this one. And side 2 here. But things would start to change when they eventually moved over to the WEA label in 1980, and after some extensive work with Mark Opitz, the band eventually put together perhaps their most well-known album from 1980, East, with Jimmy Barnes wearing a Japanese headband upside down. Here's a better shot of the band on the back cover. This album pretty much contains all of their best well-known songs, like Standing on the Outside, Choir Girl, My Baby, which was written by bass player Phil Small about his wife, Cheap Wine, which is probably their biggest hit from that particular period, and Best Kept Lies was written by Steve Presswich, Never Before by Ian Moss. Jimmy Barnes also wrote his first 2 songs, such as Rising Sun, which was about his wife going home to Japan and here going after her, and My Turn to Cry, which is arguably known for a performance that the band did on TV in early 1981 when they got about halfway through the song, probably up to just after the bridge section, when they decided to smash up the entire set as a result of just how frustrating the music industry can be at the time. Anyway, we've got the insert itself. Pretty much all of this album is well known to Australians. You still occasionally get some of these songs on the radio. Star Hotel, which was inspired by an actual riot that took place in Newcastle in late 1979 or so. There's also been a regular in the band's set list since. Onto the WEA rainbow logo. In my opinion, this is definitely one of their best albums, but it's just a little more commercial sounding than what the band had previously recorded for their first 2 albums, and the production was definitely improved significantly compared to the first 2 as well. In 1981, the band put out their first live album. If I can just carefully remove it here. This album was titled Swing Shift, and is arguably considered to be one of the finest live albums to ever come out of Australia. It pretty much contains some of the band's material from that time performed live. A few songs like 4 Walls from the East album, which was about life in prison. A couple of covers. Cold Chisel were known for doing covers early on in their career, and they never really stopped performing covers, to be honest. They pretty much would very rarely do a set list of all originals. They would at least have at least 1 or 2 covers in their set list. Here, such as Bob Dylan's Knockin' on Heaven's Door, or CCR's Long As I Can See the Light. Definitely good choices. Cold Chisel really do pretty good renditions of those songs. Some fairly generic inserts here. Just pictures of the band performing live from around this time. David Blight played the harmonica on stage with the band occasionally during that time. Saxophonists, they went through a few, including Billy Rogers, and Andy Bickers, I think, is the current saxophone player for the band. This is the side 1. This is a double album, by the way, so we've got side 1 and side 2. They're pretty much the same label, so yeah. Let's pull out the other record as well. The different images shown here. I believe that's Billy Rogers on the saxophone there, and yeah. As I said, arguably, definitely, for the time, it was definitely the best live album to come out of the early half of the 1980s. Okay, up next we've got a German compilation. The band did do some Europe touring in 1982 and 1983, and surprisingly, they had a compilation album released in Germany before they ever released one here in Australia. And I had to dig deep to try and find this one. Named after a track from the Breakfast and Sweethearts album, Northbound. Very rarely do people even know about this. This particular compilation, as I said, I didn't know about it until I read up online and had to get it. These are screenshots from the Cheap Wine promo clip, which is arguably one of the finest clips to come out of this country. Just Jimmy Barnes wandering around a house, and, you know, the band would be seen in the background for the choruses and stuff. It's a pretty good song, actually. Let's see, where is the LP? There it is. Okay, I'm going to have to pull it out of its rather generic sleeve. So anyway, this is what they included over in Germany. Side 1 here. Again, this mostly focused on the band's first 3 albums at the time. During 1981, the band did their only United States tour, and basically everything was a mess. And Jimmy Barnes in particular absolutely hated being in America and hated pretty much the entire everything. And the band got screwed around by the public relations guy that was supposed to be working with them for the tour, and in response he went and wrote arguably one of the best songs, my personal favourite song of theirs. But, of course, it was included on the band's 4th album, and arguably their best album of all time, from 1982, Circus Animals. Basically, the band is just in the middle of nowhere, in a little caravan. This album contains probably some of their best. I mean, you got Nothing I Want, which was the one that Jimmy Barnes had written, and Bow River, written by Ian Moss and sung by him as well. It's another hit that wasn't actually released as a single, but it's arguably very popular, that one. And drummer Steve Pressowich wrote 2 of their best songs, Forever Now, which I think was the only top 10 hit that they had here, actually. And still gets on the radio occasionally, as well as When the War Is Over, which has been covered by quite a number of artists over the years, and is definitely one of their best. And you've got a few of the lesser songs like Taipan and Wild Colonial Boy, which is on side 2. These are the lyrics and stuff here. Definitely a lot stronger when it comes to less commercial sounding compared to East. Definitely my preferred album over the 2 biggest that they had at the time. Anyway, let's get the LP out. Alright. During 1982 into early 1983, the band continued to do some extended touring. The band headed back to Germany in early 1983, and Steve Pressowich had taken a brief sabbatical during this time and to have back surgery, and when he came back, everything just started massively going wrong for the band at the time. And fingers were pretty quickly pointed at Steve during this time, and he was subsequently sacked from the band and replaced by Ray Arnott, who played drums on the band's final album during this particular period, 20th Century. Steve does play on 3 tracks on this album, one he also co-wrote, as well as 2 others, but otherwise Ray Arnott played the majority of the album on drums. eventually, in August of 1983, everything just completely went to hell in a handbasket, and they decided to go out with one big tour to finish off, and Steve was actually asked to come back to do the tour. He'd only been sacked for maybe 3 or 4 months, and then all of a sudden they decided to call time, go out with one last tour, and bring Steve back. But either way, some of the band's best songs are on this album, even if the album itself does sound a bit of a dud. You've got 20th Century, Saturday Night, No Sense, again written by Jim, and Flame Trees, which is probably the best song on that entire album, actually. WEA had changed their label by the time this one came out. These are some really good songs. For the international audience that is watching this from around the world, including Mr. Brody Atwood, if you are watching, mate, be sure to check out Cold Chisel. If you like hard rock and roll, Chisel definitely did do a lot of that, as well as the occasional bit of slow bluesy numbers, especially from that period. Anyway, the band put out a second live album shortly before disbanding, late 1983, early 1984 or so. It's a bit of a generic front cover. It's kind of amusing. Occasionally Chisel would play some secret gigs under the name The Barking Spiders, and this was Chisel's second live album from the time. Very weird back cover stuff, you know, it's just all weird. I mean, the picture of the band performing here dates back to the 70s, really. Again, you've got some good covers on there, as well as some songs from the period. This album comes with a giant poster, although it might be a bit difficult to remove. Yeah, okay, I must have put the poster somewhere else. No, hang on. I know it does have a poster. No, I guess I must have... Oh no, here's the poster. I think this is a poster of the band from 1975, I think. Yeah. From somewhere in South Australia. I mean, I'm not going to show you because it's a very big one. But it's a very early picture of the band from 1975, before they even got a record deal. I mean, it took them, 5 years since from when they were formed to finally put out a new album, to put out their first album. But anyway, just rather generic labels were used, pretty much to poke fun at what the whole idea was to begin with. But Cold Chisel's popularity refused to die down. In 1985, the first of 2 compilation albums at this particular period were released. 1985 saw the release of Razer Songs, which was the first Australian compilation, but their second compilation overall. Another gatefold cover. Got the songs on the back. It pretty much contains all the hits from that particular period, even though Bow River was not a single, but all the others were. Some of the songs were remixed for this particular album as well, most notably the tracks from the first 2 albums at the time. Let's just pull out the insert. There we go. Again, pretty generic looking at the time, but what do you expect, really? It's just the lyrics and stuff, that's all it really is. Okay. And we've got the labels here. Side 1 and side 2. Anyway, to close out the 1980s, the band were no longer, but the label did put out a follow-up to that album, which is titled Razer Songs. This was basically the opposite of radio songs. This was basically the material that the radio would not touch at the time. Here's the track listing here. Still a pretty impressive album, this one. This was the last LP released during this time, of course, until the 2010s. But we'll get to those particular albums in another video. This is just basically the stuff from 1978 to 1988. Although it does say 1987, I think, on the back, but I think this actually came out in 88. Alright, thank you very much for watching. If I've got your curiosity aroused, be sure to look for Cold Chisel on YouTube. You can find a lot of their songs and albums here and there. And while you're at it, be sure to press the like button. Or if you're not a Cold Chisel person, well, you can just ignore that. And comment down below. And be sure to subscribe to the Be a Good Dogger YouTube channel for more content coming at any time possible, whenever. But until next time, this is the Dogger saying have a great day, everybody. Enjoy your week. And we shall see you again.